I'm 85 years old, and I'm holding a letter I never sent. It's addressed to my 23-year-old self. My hands don't shake anymore. They're steady with the certainty you only get from looking back over 8.5 decades. My biggest regret isn't a thing I did. It's the advice I never got. I almost married the wrong man. Let me tell you what happened. It started in a library in 1958. I met Arthur first. He was a graduate student in literature, all sharp elbows and sharper wit. We bonded over books. He spoke in metaphors about our future. I was Eleanor, a budding teacher, and I felt so seen by him. Our courtship was all intense conversations, but a storm cloud lived behind his eyes. When my father died suddenly, Arthur's condolences were a perfectly recited sonnet. It was beautiful, but it was distant. He didn't know how to just hold me. That grief created a space, and another man walked right into it. Walter drove the bakery truck to my school. His laugh echoed down the hall. Where Arthur was a shadow, Walter was a cheerful light. He asked about my day and actually waited for the answer. 6 months after Dad died, he found me crying in my car. He didn't quote poetry. He said, "That sounds awful, Ellie. Let's go for a drive." We drove in silence for an hour, just watching fields. It was the first peace I'd felt. He made hard things feel not easy, but bearable. But my heart and my head were at war. Arthur proposed with the first edition of my favorite book. It was a profound intellectual promise. Walter asked me on a picnic blanket, with a squashed cupcake and flour on his apron. I was torn. My mother adored Arthur. She said Walter was a lovely diversion. I felt a terrifying clarity when I said yes to Walter. I returned Arthur's ring. He told me I was choosing simplicity over significance. His words haunted me for years. The early years seemed to prove me right. Walter built us a life, nail by nail, joke by joke. We had our daughter Sarah and our son Michael. Money was tight, but Walter met every setback with a plan, not a complaint. When the bakery closed, he took a night job at the mill without a sigh. He'd come home exhausted and still kiss my forehead. I saw Arthur sometimes. He was a professor, growing more acclaimed and more bitter. He'd always ask with pity, "Are you happy, Eleanor?" I'd say yes and mean it. Then the first real earthquake hit. Michael was 9 when they found the tumor. The world shrank to hospital corridors. I fractured. Pure terror held me still. Walter didn't. He became the commander of our hope. He researched. He organized meals with neighbors. He was the steady hand for Sarah. He'd sit with Michael for hours, telling ridiculous stories. One night I broke down sobbing in the hospital cafeteria. Walter just pulled me into his chest. He said, "We'll carry each other, Ellie. We'll get through this." And we did. Michael recovered. That crisis showed me our pattern. It got tested again and again. I ran into Arthur at the grocery store years later. He was divorcing. He spoke of his wife's emotional demands during his tenure review. He said, "You see, Eleanor, intellectual parity doesn't survive life's mundane miseries." He looked lonely and hardened. I thought of Walter, who just spent a weekend fixing my mother's leaky roof, listening to her same stories. I realized Arthur saw hardship as an imposition. Walter saw it as the real work of life, the work of love. And life had more misery in store. Walter's mother passed, then mine within 2 years. Grief doubled. I became a ghost. Walter grieved deeply, but he also cooked. He answered the phone. He paid the bills. He planted a rose bush for each of them. When I apologized for being so absent in my sorrow, he looked baffled. He said, "You don't have to perform for me, Ellie. I'm just keeping the ship steady while you heal." He was my harbor. The storms change, but they never really stop. Walter lost his job at the plant in the 80s. He was in his 50s. It was a brutal blow. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. But by dinner, it was gone, replaced by determination. He said, "Time for Plan B." He used his severance for a loan, bought a used food truck, and turned his barbecue hobby into Walter's Wagon. It was grueling. I helped after teaching. We were exhausted, but we were a team. He made an adventure out of the struggle. The business succeeded. We sailed into calmer waters. We thought the hard times were behind us. At 78, Walter had a stroke. My rock was suddenly fragile and afraid. The roles reversed. I was the planner now, the caretaker. I remembered every lesson he taught me through action. Meet the problem. Find the joy. Just show up. I bathed him. I teased him. I helped him learn to walk again. He'd get frustrated and cry. I'd hold him and say, "We'll carry each other, Walt. We'll get through this." His own words returned to him, and we did. That recovery taught me the final lesson. He's napping in his chair now. Our grandchildren's drawings are on the wall behind him. The man who built a life with me snores softly. I look at him and I see the boy who sat with me in silence, the father who told stories in a hospital, the man with the food truck. He didn't just make hard times bearable. He made us stronger in the broken places. Arthur's life was one of solitary achievement. Ours is a tapestry, worn and mended, more beautiful for its repairs, which brings me back to this letter and to you. So, my dear girl, listen. If you take nothing else from this old woman, take this. Do not marry the man who makes hard times harder, the one who meets grief with criticism, fear with coldness, struggle with resentment. Life will hand you enough darkness. Your partner should be your flashlight, not an extra weight. Look for the one who sees a problem and reaches for a tool, not a complaint. Who meets your tears with an open hand, not a turn back. Marry the man who makes hard times softer. That choice is the foundation of everything. Now, go live a beautiful, resilient life. You deserve it. You deserve it. And you know what? For a long time I thought I had. I thought my choice was just about comfort, a simpler, easier love. I didn't know it then, but I was building a fortress for storms I couldn't even see coming. The first big test was Michael. Our boy was 9. He had headaches. Then the doctors found the tumor. The world just stopped. I remember sitting in that hospital chair frozen, pure terror. I couldn't think, couldn't move. Walter walked in, took one look at me, and got to work. He wasn't scared? Of course he was. But he didn't let it paralyze him. He became the commander of our hope. He talked to every doctor. He made a chart for the nurses. He called our neighbors and organized a meal schedule so I wouldn't have to think about dinner. He'd sit with Michael for hours. Our son was so pale, so small in that bed. Walter would tell him the most ridiculous stories about the bakery truck, doing all the voices. He'd make him laugh right after a painful procedure. One night I just broke. I was in the cafeteria, sobbing into a cold cup of coffee. Walter found me. He didn't say, "It'll be okay." He didn't quote a poem. He just pulled me into his chest, his flannel shirt smelling like hospital soap and home. He said, "We'll carry each other, Ellie. We'll get through this. And we did. Michael got better. But that crisis, it showed me our pattern. Walter saw a problem and reached for a tool. Not a complaint, a tool. A few years later, I ran into Arthur at the grocery store. He was buying one sad-looking steak. He told me he was getting a divorce. He said his wife couldn't handle the intellectual isolation of his work. He said, "You see, Eleanor, I was right. Intellectual parity doesn't survive life's mundane miseries." He looked so lonely and hard, like a stone. I went home that day. Walter was in the backyard, fixing my mother's old bird bath. He'd spent the whole weekend before at her place, listening to her same stories, fixing her leaky faucet. He never called it a mundane misery. That's when I knew. Arthur saw hardship as an insult, a distraction from his real life. Walter saw it as the real life, the work of love. And more work came. Of course it did. Walter's mother passed, and then mine within 2 years. The grief was so heavy, I just shut down. I moved through the days like a ghost. Walter grieved too, deeply. But he also cooked. He answered the phone. He made sure the bills got paid. He planted a rose bush for each of them in our garden. When I finally apologized for being so absent, for not helping, he looked baffled. He said, "You don't have to perform for me, Ellie. I'm just keeping the ship steady while you heal." He was my harbor. I thought, surely this is enough storm for one lifetime. But the storms change. They don't stop. When Walter was in his 50s, the plant shut down. He lost his job. It was a brutal blow. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes at the kitchen table, holding the pink slip. It scared me. But by dinner, it was gone, replaced by a quiet determination. He said, "Well, time for plan B." He used his severance, got a small loan, and bought a beat-up old food truck. He turned his weekend barbecue hobby into Walter's wagon. It was grueling work. I'd grade papers, then go help him serve. We were exhausted, but we were a team. He made an adventure out of it, naming sandwiches after our kids. He made the struggle ours, and it worked. The business grew. We finally breathed easier. We thought, okay, the hard times are behind us now. We were wrong. We were wrong. The hardest test was still coming. Walter had the stroke when he was 78. My rock, my steady son, was suddenly so fragile, so afraid. I'll never forget the look in his eyes in that hospital bed. It was pure terror. And I had to be the strong one. The roles reversed completely. I was terrified too, but I remembered. I remembered everything he'd shown me. Meet the problem, find the joy, just show up. So I did. I became the planner, the caretaker. I bathed him. I helped him learn to eat again. The physical therapist would come, and Walter would get so frustrated trying to lift his own leg. He'd cry. Big, silent tears of anger and shame. I'd hold him. I'd kiss his forehead and I'd say, "We'll carry each other, Walt. We'll get through this." I was giving him his own words back, and we did get through it. He learned to walk again. He came home. But here's the thing they don't tell you. Some storms don't end. They just change the landscape. Walter came home, but he was slower. The man who built everything with his hands now had trouble buttoning his shirt. The man who told stories now sometimes struggled for the right word. He'd get quiet for days, and I felt so alone. I was so tired. For the first time, I let Arthur's old words back in. In the middle of the night, listening to Walter's labored breathing, I thought, did I choose simplicity? Is this it? I felt ashamed for thinking it, but I thought it. The breaking point was so small. It was a Tuesday. I dropped a plate. It shattered on the kitchen floor. I just stood there staring at the pieces. I couldn't move. Walter shuffled in, saw me, saw the mess. He didn't say anything. He just slowly, carefully bent down and started picking up the big pieces. His hands were shaking. I snapped. I didn't mean to. I just heard myself say, "Stop, just stop. I'll do it. You'll hurt yourself." My voice was sharp. It was fear, but it came out as anger. He froze. He looked up at me from the floor, and his face, it just crumpled. He looked so defeated. He said, "I'm just trying to help, Ellie. I'm not good for much else anymore." That broke me. It broke me clean in two. I sank down right there on the floor, in the middle of the china shards, and I cried. I cried for the plate, for his shaking hands, for my sharp voice, for the tumor, for the lost jobs, for our mother's roses, for everything. I cried for the weight of it all. Walter didn't reach for a tool then. He couldn't. He just crawled over to me, through the mess, and put his arms around me. He held me while I sobbed. He didn't say a word. He just held me. And in that moment, on the dirty floor, I realized the cost. This was the deal. This was the real work. It wasn't about making hard times softer. It was about sharing the weight of them, even when you're both too tired to stand. Even when you break the plates, especially then. Arthur was wrong. This wasn't simplicity. This was the most significant thing I'd ever done. Arthur was wrong. This wasn't simplicity. This was the most significant thing I'd ever done. That moment on the kitchen floor, holding each other in the broken pieces, was the final lesson. I'd spent a lifetime thinking Walter was the one who made hard times softer, and he was. But the deeper truth is, he taught me how to do it for him, too. Love isn't a shelter one person builds. It's taking turns holding the umbrella in a downpour, even when you're both already soaked to the bone. The goal isn't to avoid the storm. It's to learn how to stand in it together, even if you're leaning. So here's what I learned, really learned in these 85 years. Don't look for a man who has all the answers. Look for the one who isn't afraid of the questions, of the messy, silent, terrifying questions life throws at you. Arthur had all the right words, but they were just decoration. They didn't keep the rain out. Walter often had no words at all. He just handed me a towel. I was wrong to ever think that was a simpler choice. It was a harder, braver, more profound one. It's easy to be poetic about love when the sun is shining. The test is what you do in the hospital waiting room, at the kitchen table with a pink slip, in the grief-soaked silence after the funeral. That's where you see the architecture of a person's heart. Is it a fortress built only for fair weather, or is it a workshop full of tools for repair? My advice to you, whether you're 23 or 63, is this. Pay less attention to how he dances at the wedding and more to how he sits with you in the funeral home. Watch what he does when you're sick, not with a dramatic, life-threatening illness, but with a common cold that makes you cranky and needy. Does he sigh, or does he bring you soup? Listen to how he talks about his own setbacks. Does he blame the world, or does he start figuring out his next move? That pattern you see in the small things, that's the blueprint for the earthquakes. Don't marry potential. Don't marry the idea of a person. Marry the reality of how they handle a Tuesday that's gone all wrong. That Tuesday will repeat itself in different forms for all your days. And if you're my age, looking back, maybe you didn't choose the Walter. Maybe you chose an Arthur. Or maybe life handed you a different kind of struggle altogether. It's not too late. The lesson isn't just for the young. It's for right now. You can still decide to be the person who makes hard times softer. For your partner, for your friend, for your child, for yourself. You can still learn to reach for a tool instead of a complaint. You can still choose to be someone's harbor. That choice is available every single morning you wake up. You still have time. Maybe not decades, but you have now. And now is enough to change the weather in a single room for a single person. And that is a magnificent thing to do. I look at Walter sleeping now, and I see our whole history in the lines on his face. They're not just wrinkles. They're the map of where we've been. The trenches we dug together, the hills we climbed, sometimes carrying each other. Our life is a patchwork quilt, made from scraps of joy and squares of sorrow, and it is warm. It is so warm. That's what I want for you. Not a perfect life, a resilient one, a warm one. If this story found you, maybe it was for a reason. Maybe you're standing at a crossroads, hard in your throat, trying to choose. Or maybe you're in the middle of the storm, tired down to your bones. If my words helped, if they gave you a moment of clarity or comfort, do me a kindness. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. A daughter, a friend, a sister. Plant this seed in their garden. And if you'd like, leave a comment below telling me what your Walter moment has been. A time when someone's simple, steady presence made the unbearable bearable. I read them all. Your stories become part of mine.